Hey folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa once again. This is Chris, and it seemed like an apropos time to point out some of the deficiencies in governments, and I'm going to focus on South Africa's government in this video. Specifically, there are a few photographs that turned up in the Daily Maverick about events that unfolded beginning on the 3rd of January as Zimbabwe moved towards a draconian 30-day lockdown. Of course, President Emerson Mnangagwa is on holiday for a month while the lockdown is imposed. He can't be bothered with his people suffering. And so thousands of people have piled into the Beitbridge border crossing in South Africa. Others are crossing illegally in creek beds, trying to cross the Limpopo River, braving crocodiles and such, just to escape Zimbabwe in the latest wave of people trying to escape Cloud Cuckoo Land. Well, we've been told by President RAmaphosa, the Health Minister Luthuli, and others in South Africa that the reason for the spread of COVID-19 is because of people and their behavior. In particular, in December, they made a point of telling us about how and why citizens are responsible for the spread of COVID-19. Fascinating, this story and this theory, yet it holds little water when you realize that, in fact, it's been the government's own actors who often are the spreaders and super spreaders of this virus. Not necessarily matric parties, which these people claim, with no evidence to support it whatsoever. They simply do contact tracing after the fact and go, oh, well, you were at a party, well, you got it there. Well, you don't know they got it there. You have no evidence of it. If you followed the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction, and looked at the RNA of the virus to make sure it's from the same family and the exact same strain. Anyway, the bottom line here, folks, is that governments are responsible for the spread of this virus through their feckless policy, their stupidity, and also their mishandling of events. Case in point. Back in the early stages of the lockdown in South Africa, which began on the 27th of March 2020 for 21 days, in order for, according to President Ramaphosa, the government to get time to get hospitals prepared for the coming surge. That's why you need a 21-day lockdown in South Africa, during which they banned tobacco sales. Why? They banned alcohol sales so that people wouldn't drink and wouldn't lead to unnecessary hospitalizations for people. There's some merit to that one. They banned restaurants. They shut people in their homes. They banned walking on the beach, surfing, made it criminal offenses. At least they tried to, but of course that's all been declared unconstitutional by the North Gauteng High Court. A decision that the government of the African National Congress continues to flaunt with continuing lockdown restrictions, despite the fact that they have no authority, no constitutional legal authority to do that. So that's particularly important to point out. They banned the sale of open-toed shoes, cooked chicken. Idiocy, lunacy beyond belief. Anyway, we've seen various stages of the lockdown come and go, but one thing is very clear. From the early stages of lockdown, they deployed the South African National Defense Force, the SANDF, and the South African Police Service, the SAPS, across South Africa in an effort to ensure that people would obey the lockdown with social distancing and not being out shopping or going to beaches, going to parks, and things like that. Well, they sent large numbers of police and military into the townships like Alexandria, Canacia, and other townships around the country, Soweto, other places. And in these townships, the South African government's police forces and military were over-aggressive and abusive of South African citizens. In fact, they murdered Collins Kosa, a situation for which the South African National Defense Force soldiers were acquitted, despite the fact that they beat him to death with no justification in front of numerous witnesses. Subsequently, they killed another 10 or 11 additional black South Africans in the townships before the media caught wind of this and made a big stink about it. Once they made a big stink about it, the police and the military quietly withdrew from the townships, which are overpopulated, people in close quarters, and there was no observation of the restrictions of lockdown that took place. So after that, the next thing that happened here, folks, was that the South African government just pulled out. They stayed away from here and didn't do anything about this situation. That's why the virus spread in South Africa. That's why you have new variants of the virus in South Africa, because the virus spread unrestrained. All the lockdown measures in which they locked down people in suburban areas and in proper housing areas and in cities didn't affect the townships or the countryside. People did what they wanted and they spread the virus. And that's why the virus spread. So the lockdown had no effect positive. The only effect it had was to destroy South Africa's fragile economy. Well, now we see the latest with the situation at Beitbridge where thousands of Zimbabweans are trying to escape from Cloud Cuckoo Land to get to South Africa by crossing over formally at the border crossing with fake COVID certificates, with genuine COVID certificates. But here is a South African border crossing at Bite Bridge. Let me show you this photograph from the Daily Maverick, folks. And you'll see these health department officials ostensibly, although I suspect they could be DERCO. That's the department responsible for foreign relations and border crossings. But I suspect they're health department officials. Notice a couple things. And what jumps out at you in this photograph, folks? Take a look at that right there on the screen. Two things should jump out at you, right? You see the Zimbabwean standing there, and you see how close the government officials are. I wasn't even going to talk about that, but they are actually kind of close. Then you see him handing his passport with his bare naked hand over to a government official with a bare naked hand. What do you see below that? Surgical gloves not being utilized, sitting on the table, and you see the official, look at his face. Look very closely there, folks. Do you see him and the official to the right? That mask is not covering their noses. So what's the point of this useless virtue signaling exercise? These officials are spreading COVID-19. If anybody has it or they have it, every time they touch something physical that person just touched, they're passing COVID-19. How stupid are these government officials? They are the ones responsible. In his message after Christmas, in which President Cyril Ramaphosa told South Africans it was their fault that the virus was spreading, you're full of it. You bear responsibility. Now, here's another one, folks. This is inside the border crossing station. And look at this one. Let's take a look at this, also from the Daily Maverick. You see the gentleman there who's coming in from Zimbabwe. Look at his hands touching that marble counter. No gloves. Putting his paws, his mitts all over that counter. Look at the government official. It's difficult to tell from this angle, but based on where the mask is, I suspect it's not covering his nose. But more importantly, look at him touching that documentation from that person with bare hands, and he hands it right back to him. If you wonder how COVID is being spread in South Africa, look no further than the government's own actions, its own stupidity. This is the same government that told us months ago they needed 21 days to prepare the hospitals, yet they don't have the intensive care beds still to this day. They also told us they needed those 21 days to prepare the schools, to disinfect them. Yet at the end of it, students couldn't return to school because the schools, nothing had been done. Why? Because there wasn't time for the ANC to do their job. Really? 21 days? I suspect it had a lot more to do with the fact that the ANC was trying to find ways for members of their party who are criminals to steal from the tender process in handing and doling out the money to people to clean those schools rather than doing it themselves. And also, by the way, when the schools were supposed to be reopened after 6 weeks, why do they need to be disinfected? It's a virus. It doesn't live forever. It has a lifespan. It will fall apart and degrade when left on a surface, unprotected over a period of time. So what exactly did they need that time for? Folks, if you're looking for why COVID-19 is spread across South Africa, it is not the fault of South Africans entirely. It is the fault of its government and its stupid, brain-dead, feckless policy. Where's the leadership at Bite Bridge? How are these officials allowed to do this without any oversight? And the fact that they let newspapers in there to take photographs of it and don't do the common sense approach that, wow, we're not wearing gloves. We're not covering our face properly. We're touching surfaces directly, handing it to someone. And how often by mistake does that official actually touch the other person's skin? Do you see this? And these are the people we are supposed to trust with our health and welfare, that they're acting in our best interest. When they have no common sense whatsoever, they do whatever the hell it is they please. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to blame someone for the spread of COVID-19 in South Africa, if you want to blame someone for the 28,000 deaths attributed to COVID-19, the over 1 million South Africans who've tested positive for COVID-19, look no further than the government of South Africa, the African National Congress. These people are absolutely clueless, and they have no leadership, no oversight, no responsibility to follow up on things they should be following up on. The leadership at this border crossing ought to be sanctioned and or sacked immediately, without reservation. This is unacceptable. And if you're wondering why COVID is spreading, there's your answer right there. Don't blame South Africans who sat in their homes, lost their jobs, were depressed, some suicidal, suffering from social isolation for months on end because of your stupidity. Folks, if you're not a subscriber to Chris White Africa, I ask you to become a subscriber by smashing that subscription button right down there. Be sure to like the video if you don't mind. Appreciate likes. And you're welcome to leave a comment. Thanks a lot for your support and patronage of this channel. God bless and have a good day. And don't trust any government. None of them are trustworthy at this point. They've all lied to us or abused us in one way or another. You can trust certain leaders and politicians, but governments, they're not looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves.